Everyone, this is Nikachu. Let's talk about some really powerful cards that have been spoiled here for Amonkhet that's coming out soon. Wow. Okay, let's just get right into it. The new Gideon. What the hell? What were they thinking when they made this card? You know, I love how they push the game, but this is a little too much. This is a 3-mana Planeswalker with Platinum Angel attached to it. Okay, so let's go. 3 mana. A lot of decks can play this. Death and Taxes can play this. Most importantly, let's just get right. Blue-white control, or Jeskai control, or Esper control. Any control playing white will absolutely love this Planeswalker. Why? Well, first off, it's got no minus abilities, and it's got this brilliant +1. Until your next turn, prevent all damage target permanent will deal. That can include manlands. But most importantly, it will force decks to commit themselves to board sweepers. So you got one creature out, well, too bad. It can't do any damage. So you got to put 2 creatures on the board. And if you do that, well, boom, Anger the Gods, or Supreme Verdict, or Wrath the God, or Damnation. So it will encourage a lot more. It will make board sweepers a lot stronger. It will encourage you to put more stuff on the board in order to beat them. So, of course, it's also a win condition by itself. 0 mana turns into a 4/4 human, indestructible as usual. Nothing beats Gideon for some reason. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. And, of course, the 0 ability. You have Platinum Angel. So long as you control a Gideon Planeswalker, you have a Platinum Angel, basically. You can't, as long as you control Gideon Planeswalker, you can't lose the game, and your opponents, they can't win the game. So you have to kill Gideon before you even get to kill your opponent. Oh my god. You could play just a Gideon deck. I mean, Gideon Jura itself is insane. It's a very hard Planeswalker to beat because it's very big, and it also gets all the creatures to attack it. But so Gideon of the Trials, very, very powerful card. I can see how now Control is going to have a lot more tools available to them. So Gideon of the Trials, very powerful card. But moving on, we've got As Foretold. As Foretold, also a ridiculous card. I think a lot of people are looking at it wrong, though. So As Foretold is a 1 blue, 2 colorless enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. So this is basically an Aether Vial for anything. And with Aether Vial, you have to vial in creatures with converted mana cost equal to the number of counters on it. But this is equal to or less. So you could have this thing on 3 and play, I don't know, Oblivion Rings and play Path to Exile at the same time. This is any spell. Now, a lot of people are trying to figure out, well, how do we break this with Living End or with Balance or like Restore Balance or any of those suspend cards? If you didn't know, there is one suspend card, very powerful, Ancestral Vision. Of course, you play As Foretold, play Ancestral Vision, and draw 3 cards. It's not as big as it looks. At first, it seemed nuts, but you're actually spending 2 cards to get 3. It's very similar to what's it called, like compulsive research. I'll have the correct card on correct graphic on the screen, but you're drawing 3, losing 2, but not exactly losing because you have the As Foretold still on the battlefield, gaining value every single turn. So a lot of people are trying to break this with suspend cards. How do we make this suspend card combo deck? I don't think that's the way to go, because like with those expertise decks, like what Saffron Olive was trying to make, they were very inconsistent because you just had like a bunch of these expertise cards or a bunch of split cards that don't really work very well by themselves. They're very clunky, so like the deck sort of works, but it's not very consistent. And I think that's going to be the exact same thing that's going to be happening with the suspend cards. If you jam too many Living Ends and the Restore Balances and a bunch of other 0 mana suspend cards, you're going to end up casting nothing. You're so dependent on drawing As Foretold, because if you don't have it in your hand, then your deck doesn't do anything. But one place I think this card would be very good very, very, very good, would be Control. I think Control would love this card. Why? Well, first, a lot of them already play Ancestral Vision, so they will get those cards. But in addition to that, they want as much mana as possible. More mana gives them more of a chance to play the cards in their hand, and they can just keep taking it up. Control games go very long, so just after maybe 3 turns, maybe we're already dead because As Foretold got so many counters on it. Think of it this way: Control decks were also very dependent on playing lands as their sources of mana, but with As Foretold and the new cycle lands, which we'll get into, well, we might as well get in here right now. There are now dual lands that cycle. They come into play tap, but I don't think that's going to be a big deal for control decks. They can afford the lands coming into play tapped. So instead of playing lands, they can now cycle card. They can use mana through As Foretold, and then if they draw lands, they can cycle them and keep the threat density of their hand very high. I don't know if that's super, super important, but I think this is very mana efficient. It also lets them play, as far as I'm concerned, lets them play sorceries at instant speed. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I think if there is a deck that really wants to use this card, that can play this on turn 3 and then utilize it for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 turns of the game, it's control decks. So if people thought Control was dead, well, now Grixis, Esper, Jeskai, Blue-Eye Control, they now have a huge card in the form of As Foretold. At least that's how I am looking at it. Of course, playing spells for free is busted as hell. There is quite a bit of an investment in this card, though. Let's be honest. Like, Modern is a turn 4 format, more or less, and you're playing this thing on turn 3, and you still have to wait turns 4, 5, and 6 to get an investment out of it. So I think it is a relatively fair card, and I'm very interested to see how on earth it's going to be breaking into Modern. A lot of people think Control is dead in Modern. Well, I think this is a big boost to Control. And is there a combo deck that break this card? It's possible. I don't know, but it's possible. We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, so that's As Foretold, and I talked about the cycle lands. It's also very exciting. We got dual lands that can be fetched for and can cycle. That is probably going to make its way into like red-green Valakut decks because they can cycle and then find the answers that they need or find the combo pieces that they need. They're definitely going to be breaking into Modern. Don't know if Ad Nauseam wants this sort of card. They might prefer still the Scry lands because they need the land on the board anyway, and it helps search through their library for the cards that they want. But then maybe they will still use these cycle lands anyway. Some other last exciting thing that was spoiled just recently was a new Nissa. Nissa, Steward of Elements. It's a blue Nissa. And it's also the first Planeswalker, as far as I know, with an X in its casting cost. A blue, a green, and a color and X. It comes into play with X counters. It's got +2 Scry too. Now, I'm excited for this card because of Simic Merfolk, more or less. I'm very excited for Simic Merfolk. We're going to be going through all the splashes on my channel, and one of them is going to be Simic Merfolk, but I'm going to wait for this thing to be spoiled before I start playing with Simic Merfolk. So a lot of people think, well, you have to wait for it to come out on 4 or 5 or 6. No, you can just play it on 3. It's going to come in with 1 loyalty, but you immediately scry. It goes up to 3, and you start searching through your library for the goods. And Merfolk does not have any ability to manipulate their deck whatsoever. We're totally dependent on just hoping to draw what we want. This thing can help us find gas. It is something that even against a control deck, against Jund, any attrition-based deck, we can slam this thing on the board. Doesn't protect itself super well. If you play it on 3, that is. You can afford to... Later in the game, it might protect itself because you can play it for a very large amount of X and then scry, and then hopefully it can take a hit or something. So not very good at protecting itself, but very good at card selection anyway. And I think the ultimate is also very, very powerful. Oh, let's get to the 0 ability. You can look at the top card of your library. If it's a land or a creature with converted mana cost equal or less to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, then you can just put it into play. So if there's land on top, put it into play. If it is a creature card, put it into play. So let's say I played Nissa, I scryed 2, look at the top 2 cards of my library, and it's 2 creatures. So I'm going to draw one of those creatures next turn, and then I can put one into play for free. Pretty good value. It's something I would really like. It's something really good in a board when the board is empty or there is a board stall. So there's a lot of applications I would love to see this Nissa. Not to mention its ultimate is pretty powerful. So at -6, you untap up to 2 target lands you control. There are 5/5 elementals with flying and haste until end of turn, and they're still lands. So it's a pretty critical kill condition. Remember, they're elementals, so they get pumped up by Master of Waves, so they could be 6/6s, or maybe even 7/7s, who knows. So I think that's also a very relevant part of this thing. You know, as a Merfolk player, we do a decent chunk of damage, or actually our opponents do a decent chunk of damage to themselves. Against Death's Shadow, I guess if we somehow have 8 mana available, we can like just slam this thing, ultimate it, and then kill them in the air. I mean, they can of course kill the creatures, but they need they would need the removal spells. Burn spells are not going to kill them, although you know, Fatal Push would do it. So I think there are a lot of exciting new cards that are going to make a big impact. Not super sure if this Nissa will make a big impact, but I'm very interested to try her out. She has, aside from the not being very good at protecting herself, she's got a lot of abilities that I think Merfolk wants. And, oh man, that Gideon. Oh, that Gideon. The Gideon, the cycle lands, As Foretold, that's all going to help control. As Foretold, for example, just completely undermines the Tectonic Edge strategy. Completely undermines it. Anyway, what are you excited for in Amonkhet? There's tons of nice new cards, and it's not even the end of it. They're still coming out as we speak. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Nikachu talking about the Amonkhet spoilers being released.